Susan Summer had been with the Bureau of Consumer Analysis for 15 years, and she thought she'd seen it all. Beef shortages, gas hikes, even that weird period in 2018 when the price of bananas tripled overnight. But this was different. The cost of eggs had been rising exponentially, faster than any other grocery staple. 6 months ago, a dozen eggs averaged $3.49. Now, the same carton went for $19.99, and that was if you could find one. Something wasn't right. Her boss, Director Litchfield, called her into his office on a grey Tuesday morning. The blinds were drawn, the air smelled stale, like the inside of an old lunchbox. "Susan," he said, rubbing his temples, "I need you to find out what the hell is going on." She nodded, already pulling out her notepad. "Supply chain issues? Avian flu?" "Maybe," Litchfield said. "Or maybe something worse." She should have listened to that little curl of dread in her stomach. Instead, she packed up her bag and headed out, thinking it was just another assignment. She was wrong. The first stop was the distribution centre for one of the largest egg suppliers in the country, based in a small town in Pennsylvania. She expected to see stressed-out farmers complaining about costs, maybe some underpaid workers grumbling about long hours. Instead, she found something else. The plant was eerily quiet. The air reeked of something acrid, a mix of burnt hair and something metallic. No one met her at the front gate, even though she had called ahead. A light drizzle misted the air as she walked toward the processing facility. And then she saw the first egg. It lay cracked open on the pavement outside the main entrance, its yolk an angry shade of red. Not orange, not yellow. Red, like fresh blood. Susan stopped, her breath catching in her throat. Maybe it was a prank. Maybe some worker had a sick sense of humour. But then she saw another. And another. A trail of cracked, bleeding eggs leading toward the loading dock. Her hands trembled as she took out her phone and snapped a picture. That's when she heard the sound. A soft, wet scratching. She turned her head toward the source. Inside the warehouse. Something moved in the shadows. The scratching became more insistent, more frenzied. Something was inside, trying to get out. Susan stepped backward, her mind screaming at her to run, to get in her car and never look back. But then the warehouse doors burst open, and the chickens came out. They weren't normal chickens. Their feathers were sparse, molted away, to reveal raw, pink skin covered in jagged black veins. Their beaks were elongated, more like snouts, and their eyes, God, their eyes were wrong. Too human, too intelligent. They watched her, their heads cocking in unnatural, jerky movements. The biggest one, a monstrous thing the size of a dog, stepped forward. Its talons clicked against the pavement. Its throat bulged as it made a noise somewhere between a cackle and a gurgle. And then it spoke. "Help us!" Susan screamed. She didn't remember getting back to her car. The next thing she knew, she was speeding down the highway. Her hands white-knuckled on the wheel. Her phone buzzed in her lap, but she ignored it. Her mind was too full of images she couldn't process. The eggs, the chickens, the voice. By the time she made it back to the bureau, her face was ghost white. She stormed into Litchfield's office, shaking, barely able to find the words. "They're wrong," she whispered. It's the eggs, the chickens. There's something wrong with them." Litchfield sighed and leaned back in his chair, rubbing his eyes. "I was afraid of that." Susan blinked. "You knew?" He didn't answer. Instead, he slid a folder across the desk. Inside were reports, classified memos, a blurry satellite image of an unmarked farm. Government correspondence stamped with a single phrase, Project Yo. Susan felt her stomach drop. "They've been experimenting," Litchfield said. trying to make a more efficient breed, more eggs, less feed. But something went wrong. She thought of the bleeding eggs, the voice. "What do we do?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Litchfield sighed. "Nothing. This goes beyond us." Susan felt something shift in the air, a crawling sensation at the base of her skull. She turned slowly. Outside the window in the parking lot, a single egg sat on the pavement. A deep red crack split its surface, and it was moving.